Welcome, ladies and gents. My name is Curci, and I have been playing a lot of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. You want to know why I've been playing a lot of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare? Because it's a good game. It really reinvents the way you play Call of Duty, which is exactly what I wanted out of this game. After playing through the story mode and some of the multiplayer, I started asking myself, hey, is this the best Call of Duty game ever? Which is the topic for today, and I asked everybody the question of, is Call of Duty Advanced Warfare the best Call of Duty? So let's break down why I think this game is so good, and I'm going to break it down in the way that I experienced it, and the first thing I did was I played the single player. And the reason why I played the single player first, even though a lot of people are probably saying, hey Rick, it's a Call of Duty game, why wouldn't you play the multiplayer first? And that's because I knew that there was going to be some new mechanics in the game, and I wanted to be introduced to them through the single player, and then go into the multiplayer knowing how to use them. Now the first thing that I noticed when I started up the single player campaign was how good the graphics looked. As I was watching these cinematics, which would only take place before and after missions, I started to make a comparison of like, hey, these look a lot like the cinematics that introed and outroed Halo 4. Generally speaking, the cinematics looked really good. The motion capture, just the way that the characters, the way that they're saying their lines is telling a story, and the way you see it on their faces. It's really good acting, and it's just another way of telling story, and, well, might as well talk about the story at this point. So what is the story of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare? Well, just like the title says, it is Advanced Warfare, so therefore in the future. It's about 40 years in the future, where the soldiers have like these exosuits that give them increased strength and maneuverability. We have laser guns, walking tanks, hover tanks. Yes, we all know that futuristic was a thing that Call of Duty has done before with Black Ops 2, but let's be honest, did that really have a lasting impact on the game like this game does? No, it does not. The multiplayer, you played the same. The gameplay was generally the same. Now, you play as Jack Mitchell. He's voiced by Troy Baker, but Jack Mitchell starts the game off as a U.S. Marine and then later gets hired by a private military group known as Atlas. Atlas is led by Jonathan Irons, played by Kevin Spacey. But that's another thing too, is these private military groups are the strongest military groups. It's no longer like, okay, the U.S. is the strongest or Russia's the strongest. It's, no, this privately owned military group, Atlas, is the strongest one out there. And these guys actually just, they sell out their loyalty to the highest bidder. It's like, hey, you guys got a problem? Sure, we'll help you out, I guess. Now, a guy who leads that group, you gotta understand, like, there's gotta be some sort of God complex going on. You were in command of the strongest military group. What do you achieve with that? Which is basically more or less what Advanced Warfare covers, is that sort of events that are playing out. Like, what would a guy do if he had that much power? And there are no laws or regulations that he has to answer to. It is a privately owned group, an international privately owned group. They don't have loyalties with any specific person. And I like that concept, and there were a lot of things in the story. It really feeds on that a little bit. But the problem with the story, while it had a good concept, it had a good layout, and it had a really good ending, it was so predictable. There were a lot of times I'm sitting there and I'm like, hey, I bet you this happens, and then that thing happened. And every time I was wrong, I was like, oh, I bet you this is going to happen. No, that actually didn't happen. It happened this way. But that's actually not as cool as the way that I would have guessed it would have happened. Here's an example of what I mean. If I put an apple and a firecracker next to each other on a table, and then I light the firecracker, I would have guessed that maybe when the firecracker goes off, it would have made the entire apple explode. But what actually happens is that when the firecracker goes off, it just sort of makes the thing roll off the table. And I'm like, oh, wow, that wasn't what I was expecting. I mean, what I expected is actually a lot cooler or a lot more interesting, but that's not what happened. Keeping in mind, that only happened like maybe once or twice in the story. The rest of it was all stuff that I got right. Yeah, that's kind of lame. Call of Duty has always been really good with its story. One of the best stories in Call of Duty, the best story in Call of Duty, in my opinion, is Black Ops 2. There were so many twists and turns, there were options, like you could play the game differently and the ending would be different, but it had like this awesome twist in there, and if you played differently, the twist was different for you. Call of Duty games have been good with like, oh hey, there's a twist. Even the Modern Warfare games kind of had a twist at some point. Call of Duty games have always been pretty good with their stories. They've introduced the plot, they give you the protagonist, the villain, and then there's a plot twist in there somewhere, or some sort of big surprise that gives you going, wow, that was awesome. Granted, some of those oh my god moments aren't as big as other oh my god moments, but you get what I'm trying to say. But because Advanced Warfare is so predictable, you kind of lose that a little bit, and even when there is a twist in this game, but when that does happen, you're like, yeah, I mean, I saw that coming from a mile away. That doesn't surprise me in the least. It was a little bit of a bummer. Yes, the game had good story. Yes, while I was playing it, I was having fun. I mean, story's not the most important thing about the game. It is something that I highly revere. I've put out multiple videos of me praising a game because it had such a good story, and then bashing a game because it didn't have a very good story. Destiny. But story is not the most important thing in the game. It is about gameplay. It is about having fun while you're playing it. So when I bash Destiny for having a bad story, that's not the only reason why I don't like that game. The reason why I don't like that game is because the game was fun, Sometimes, but other times it wasn't. But never once while I was playing Advanced Warfare did I say to myself, I'm not having fun anymore. No, I was consistently having fun playing each mission back to back to back to back. Almost lost myself in the game. Now, you would think that that'd be a little weird considering the Call of Duty formula of follow this guy from every room and clear out the room of enemies as you go. I mean, yes, that Call of Duty formula is still, I mean, let's face it, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. Call of Duty is still in the title. So you need to have things that are pretty recognizable and pretty familiar when it comes to Call of Duty. And let's be honest, it's a first-person shooter. There's really not much more you can do other than here's a gun in first-person view, you're gonna shoot the bad guy that's over there. But at least Advanced Warfare tried to change up the pacing a little bit. In one section, I was jumping from bus to bus to bus, and then I fell off the bus and I was using like my Spider-Man gloves to hang on to it. And then as I was hanging on to it, there was this car trying to ram me, and I would just like run up it, and then I finally jumped on the car, punched into it, pulled the driver out, and threw him into traffic. The entire time I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my god, that's awesome. Yeah, there were some cool moments in this game, and that is what you would expect, a Call of Duty moment, if you will. In Ghost, it was like, here, hurry up, get to the chopper, there's a bunch of explosions going around us. In that respect, that's kind of a cheap way of having a Call of Duty moment. They're like, we have to have a Call of Duty moment. What do we do? I don't know, put explosions, make them run that way. I like how the Call of Duty moments in Advanced Warfare were kind of unique. Like, yeah, let's face it, Call of Duty as a military simulator, it's not accurate. This is not the way war is. War's not all about like these big explosions, but it's a video game. A game is made to be fun, so it's gonna throw like a bunch of like over exaggerated stuff, but that's why we play Call of Duty. We play it for like these over exaggerated epic moments in terms of the story mode anyway. One of the Call of Duty moments that really sticks out in my head is Modern Warfare 3, that scene where the Eiffel Tower collapses. I remember just sitting there and being like, oh wow, that happened. There's another scene in Call of Duty Ghosts. Now I'm gonna put this out there. I absolutely hate this game. There is barely anything about this game that I like, but it started off epic. That scene where you're like running through the town with your brother and things are like the ground is breaking apart and rising up and then lowering down and there's explosions all over the place. Call of Duty Ghosts set the bar here, and then it reached here. Like, I also felt that Advanced Warfare started off pretty high, but I mean, it got progressively higher as it went. That's arguable. I mean, in my opinion, I felt like, it did a good job of pacing things out. But the game didn't have me doing the same thing the entire time. Like, yes, there were moments I was jumping on the buses, and then there was another moment where I was in like a mech power suit, and I was just destroying dudes left and right. I remember the first time you ever see one of those mech power suits, which by the way is in the multiplayer. The guy in the suit is an ally, you're coming back to the base, you're being chased by enemies, and then after you get past him, he just goes, and he just starts firing on all the enemies. I'm just sitting there being like, that's freaking cool. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, the game's gotta put me into one of those suits. If it doesn't put me into one of those suits, I'm gonna be really upset. And then it finally did, and it was like a good moment of like, okay, I'm punching dudes, I'm shooting at them, firing rockets and stuff. But then after that, it was done, and I was like, oh, it's over. But I felt like the game said, hey, did you enjoy that time playing it? And I said, yeah. And then the game said, great, here it is again. I'm just like, Call of Duty Ghosts didn't do that. Call of Duty Ghosts said, hey, did you enjoy that moment you just had? Good, because that was the only time you were ever going to get it. But I like how I wasn't doing the same thing all the time. I wasn't just running through the area and shooting at enemies. I was piloting one of those mech suits. I was driving in a hover tank. I was piloting like a jet thing that I don't really know what I was piloting. I was flying in the air firing things. And then in one moment I was jumping on top of buses. Destiny didn't do that. I keep bringing up Destiny. I'm not going to talk about Destiny anymore. Go away. Thank you. The single player was just a really well-made single player. It just kept me engaged. It had like really cool moments that just changed the pace a little bit. Actually was pretty well balanced. A good story that was somewhat predictable, and that's a little bit disappointing. And good graphics on top of that. So let's talk about the gameplay for a second. The gameplay is just... gameplay's really good. In a lot of other first-person shooters, the gun you fire and you're like, now it's over here now. But Advanced Warfare did what Titanfall did, where it was just like, where I'm pointing is where my bullets are going. And I like that, because I hate recoil. I hate battling against it. It's one of the things that I really didn't like about some of the Call of Duty games from the past, is that I was just fighting the gun to stay straight. So the shooting in the game is a lot more fun. The sounds? I remember playing through the game and just shooting a gun, and I'm like, wow, that actually sounds really cool. The sounds were really good. The visuals were really good. The mechanics were really good. So I imagine that if developers were sitting there and they said to themselves, like, how can we take Call of Duty to another level where it hasn't gone before? Like, how do we add in certain things without actually breaking the gameplay? And they were like, can we just make people double jump? I never would have guessed the ability to double jump would drastically change the way a game like Call of Duty was played, but it does. It's not like Titanfall where you're like wall running and stuff. You're just simply like jumping on top of things and like dashing left and right and forward. It's just the really good maneuverability. There are a lot of times where I got shot, but I didn't know where the guy was coming from, and I just jumped up in the air and landed behind him. It's just, it makes you play differently, which is exactly what I would have wanted out of this game. In past Call of Duty games, when you get shot, what a lot of people do is they'll go prone, but I've noticed now that not a lot of people are doing that. They're actually jumping up. It's changing the way the game is played while making it easier for first-time players. Actually, there's a mode in there that will kick out anybody with a high kill-death ratio and just keep it down to your level. It's great balancing, but I'm kind of weaving in unintentionally to multiplayer, so we might as well talk about the multiplayer. Every ability in the exosuit minus, like, you have to unlock a couple of things, but they're all in multiplayer. Double jumping, dashing, and all that kind of good stuff, that all happens at the start of the game when you're level 1. And then you get, like, there's a shield that you can put up. It's like a rod shield. There's a speed boost that you can get. Later on, you can unlock the ability to cloak up. And I was surprised at how often I was like pulling up that shield just so I could retreat and like get away. And then there were a lot of times I'm like jumping up on top of ledges, going in the buildings from this way. Like the maps are actually really well designed. They're still like relatively a Call of Duty size, but they're like a level of verticality. It's like a first level and then a second level. It's not like in depth like Titanfall where it's just like, hey, I can like wall run and like there are pathways. I can wall run on this wall and go through that building and then jump up to the roof. It's not all like that. Like I feel like the navigation tools when I was playing in multiplayer might have been a little bit clunky, because there's a lot of times in the maps where you think like you can jump on top of this building, and you possibly could because you can reach it, but you hit an invisible wall and it pulls you back down. Then there are moments where it's just like, hey, I can jump over this low wall, and then the game's like, nope, back off. And then there are times where I'm just like, hey, I can actually jump on top of that building, and you can, because you actually, there's no invisible wall, you can stand on top of it. But it's just that my double jump isn't allowing me to get up there, and I just keep banging off the wall. The movements in multiplayer are a little bit clunky, and that's a little bit of a bummer, but you can't deny the fact that, hey, I am playing the game differently. And ultimately, is the game more fun because of it? In my opinion, yes. I said it during the Let's Play, I'm going to say it again. When I play a Call of Duty game, it takes me a while to get good at it. But eventually, I will start to get good at it. I will realize how you're supposed to play and start playing it like that. But when I'm not playing Call of Duty for a while, and then I jump into it, usually I just get demolished. But I jumped in my first match playing Advanced Warfare after I beat the campaign, and I did really well. It was just like I could jump into a game after not playing it for a while and actually hold my own. It doesn't take me like 3-4 hours to actually get good at it. Mind you, there were some issues that I was having later on while I was playing it last night that, okay, yeah, I'm pretty bad. But I've never denied the fact that I've always been relatively bad at Call of Duty. Call of Duty is not my game. This is a game I enjoy. But I've been playing the same Call of Duty year after year ever since Call of Duty 4. The Call of Duty games have always been the same in terms of multiplayer. But finally, we get one that changes the way you play. The double jumping and navigation just changes the way you traverse the field. It doesn't sound like much, but it adds in so much more dynamic. And it's good! At its core, it is still Call of Duty. The developer said, let's add in very little that changes the way you play, but without breaking the actual gameplay that people always want to keep playing. Because there's no denying it. Call of Duty is the #1 entertainment property in the world. It's so successful, it didn't have to change a thing, but it did, and it did it well. I just thoroughly enjoyed my experience with Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. I actually, as soon as I'm done filming this video, I'm probably going to go play it more. The game's got really good multiplayer, it's got a good story, it's got good graphics, it's got good sound, it's got good controls, good mechanics. It's different from what we are all used to seeing. It's just almost everything about this game is so good. But the question is it the best Call of Duty game? No. And that's because of one game. Because yes, Advanced Warfare is a little bit of a game changer. Future Call of Duty titles are probably going to style themselves after Advanced Warfare. But it wasn't as much of an impact as this game, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. This game set the standard. It changed the pace. It took the game series from World War II to the modern setting. It introduced a story, a villain, a twist, and then it had its multiplayer that people just loved. This right here is almost a damn near perfect game. Granted, there have been better stories since. I think Modern Warfare 2, even Modern Warfare 3 had a better story. I still retain Black Ops 2 is the best Call of Duty story ever. But Call of Duty 4 was the first to do a lot of things that were adapted into the Call of Duty formula. You need to have these things to be considered a Call of Duty game, to feel like a Call of Duty game, and it's all because of Call of Duty 4. Are there some things that I think Advanced Warfare does better than Call of Duty 4? Yes, but that doesn't change the fact that it's not revolutionary. It didn't change the game entirely. In my opinion, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is almost like a classic. You really can't be better than it. You can't replace the things that it has done to be revolutionary in the genre. I don't think that Advanced Warfare is the best Call of Duty. That title belongs to another. Do I think it's the second best? Absolutely. It wasn't as revolutionary as Call of Duty 4, but it was still like game-changing in its own way. It was a very minor level. Advanced Warfare may not be the best Call of Duty game, but it's a pretty damn good one. It's a different Call of Duty than what we're used to seeing, and I think that Call of Duty fans are gonna love it. This Call of Duty fan loves it. And I want to send a message to all the former Call of Duty fans that just got tired of the Call of Duty games being the same year after year and decided that they weren't gonna buy any more Call of Duty games. Either wait for the price to drop or borrow it from a friend, but Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, in my opinion, is a game that is needed to be played by people. Especially fans of first-person shooters, people who used to like Call of Duty that don't anymore play Advanced Warfare. It probably won't get you back into the Call of Duty series for the long run, but it will definitely be an enjoyable experience. Anyway, guys, that's my opinion on the game. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.